If you're going to try to manifest something in your life, especially something big, something substantial like a business, a partner, something that's going to require you to be a new version of yourself, how do you think you're going to accomplish that if you're unable to balance yourself to begin with? Right? So think about this. You were given the responsibility of taking care of yourself, taking care of your body, your mind, your emotions. And if those come out of balance, if you're having trouble balancing those, what makes you think that you'll be able to uphold the balance within your projection, within what it is that you're creating? Because the things that we create, the things that we want to manifest, the new versions and levels of life that we want to manifest, those require balance in order to be solidified, in order to become something that is substantial and something that lasts. But if we're not balanced to begin with, what makes you think you could balance something outside of you? Right? Now, this is kind of the irony of manifestation, that a lot of people go about manifestation and trying to get things in their life in order to balance themselves. And this is all backwards. People are often thinking, well, if I get this thing, and once I get this thing, then I'll be balanced. Then my emotions will feel better. Then I can be healthier. Then my mind is going to feel better. I'm going to have less stress. I'm not going to be about this. So until I get this thing, I am unbalanced. But you're never going to get that thing so long as you can't balance yourself to begin with. Because if you're trying to manifest something that's balanced and you are unbalanced, you're not matching energetically. You're opposing each other because you're trying to bring in something balanced while being unbalanced. What do you think is going to happen? If you can't balance yourself to begin with, you can't support that, right? This would be like having a boat out at sea and you dropping something huge on it that it can't deal with, and it topples over. The boat sinks because it can't handle that. It doesn't have the foundation in order to handle that. This is why when you have boats that are out at sea, there's like a payload to it, right? It can handle a certain amount of capacity, and the weight has to be distributed in the correct ways in order for that to move with the waves and to go over the big waves without sinking, right? This is the same thing with your body, with your vessel, your spiritual vessel, if you will. These things have to be balanced. You have to have a strong foundation of self, a strong balance within yourself that you are regularly maintaining in order for you to even bring that payload, so to speak, into your field, into your life. So, my friends, in order to level up, we have to maintain our balance. We have to be taking care of our balance, and we have to make sure that the things that we're chasing, the things that we want to manifest and bring into our life, aren't an excuse for us to not deal with what we need to deal with now. Make sense? Okay, so with that, I want to talk about how when we get unbalanced and when we seem to be chasing things and trying to get things in order to create a balance, and then our manifestations aren't working, and we start thinking, oh, well, I guess I can't manifest at all. Like, I guess I don't have that ability. And then you start thinking like there's some force opposing you, right? Like there's some force that is keeping you from manifesting and it's keeping you down. And with that, you begin to take on the illusion that there is actually an enemy. Now, this is that old saying that when there is no enemy within, the enemy without can do no harm, right? But the actual truth is, when you're whole within yourself, there is no enemy outside of you. There never was an enemy outside of you. And to get into the state of consciousness where like something's blocking you, something's keeping you down, something's keeping you from having what you want, and that is an enemy, and I need to fight it, I need to protect myself from it, that's a divided state of consciousness. So when we get too far into this divided state of consciousness where we're feeling like there's an enemy and we need to deal with it, then we're going further down the path of imbalance within ourselves, because that is just a reflection of how we're unwhole. Remember, these challenges, these alleged blocks that we face, are reflections showing us how we're not being whole, where we are unbalanced, and where we're not taking care of ourselves at the get-go. Because remember, my friends, when it comes to actually getting the things that you want in your life, it is not actually about the things. It is about the process by which you have to grow into the being that has the things, right? It's not about the things. It's about you becoming the person that has those things. And the person that has certain things, especially when you see the difference between like someone who seems to have it all in their life and then someone who seems to have nothing. Well, what's the difference? That person that has it all can maintain the balance of having all of those things. Whereas if that person that doesn't, they can't seem to rise out of a situation. They might feel stuck in their life. They might feel like they can't accomplish anything because every time they get to this next level, everything falls apart, or something bad happens, or something deals with it and makes it so it doesn't work out. This is a reflection of balance, my friends. This is a reflection of the natural state of the universe, okay? Because every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? I'm sure you've all heard that before. But that means that the universe, by its own nature, is diametrically opposed, meaning two forces in order to maintain a balance, okay? It is constantly seeking a balance. So in order to actually create change, we need to make sure that we're not becoming too polarized, right? If we go way too far to one side and get into a vibration that is unfamiliar within our normal balanced reality, we take ourselves too far out of our internal balance in order to create a change, it's gonna topple over. That rubber band is gonna snap back and it's gonna bring you back to where you are. So then that brings up the question, well, how do we actually change then? If what you're experiencing now is a balance, and every time you get out of that balance, it's going to, let's say every time you get out of that balance significantly, it's going to take you right back to where you were. It's going to bring you back to your original balance. Then how do we change? And this is where we talk about pace. We talk about nature. We think about how in order for a tree to grow, it goes through seasons. And at the beginning of this tree's life, what it's doing is, before it even pokes its head above the surface, let alone starts bearing fruit, it digs its roots into the ground. Because that tree, your projection, needs to have a firm grounding. We need to build it from the bottom up. Okay? And oftentimes people bringing these ideas down from the higher energies, which is great, not saying not to do that, but if they can't ground it, it's just going to be something that's unbalanced. Imagine if a tree grew out of the ground without growing its roots and it grew really huge and then it had all these leaves. And then the next time a big storm came and was blowing it around, it'd just knock it right over. It'd pull it straight out of the ground because it doesn't have its roots. A tree is a perfect example of something that is diametrically balanced, right? The roots equal the branches. And it is because of this that that tree is able to weather the storm. When the storm comes, it bends, it moves with it, it flows with it, but its roots are solid. They're not going to move. So when these forces come to take you out of your balance, you need to make sure that your rooting is firm. You also need to recognize the pace of how things grow and how things come to be. Oftentimes there's all this culture about like instant manifestation and get it overnight. And depending on the thing, I'm not saying that can't happen, but I'm saying, could you handle it if it did? This is what's important about the process, my friends, especially when it comes to you becoming a new version of yourself, you becoming the person that has that business or that relationship or that way of life or that home or whatever it is. It's about going through the process of becoming balanced at each individual stage in order for you to get to that stage. And that often comes through seasons, right? So if we think about like the winter, okay, in the winter, the seeds freeze under the ground. And when the spring happens, we see things that begin to start opening up, right? The sun starts shining and the water starts thawing out. And these nutrients begin to move with this new light that's coming. And you get this season of growth. And then the summer, and then everything's thriving at that stage. And then you get the fall where essentially the whole cycle recycles itself and it comes back around again. We go through seasons just like nature does. But oftentimes, if we can't stay balanced in our projection in a certain season, in a certain phase of that lesson, then what we're going to do is basically be digging up our seeds and wondering, why is there no fruit here? Why can't I manifest? Why can't I get to where I want to get? My friends, it's because we're not being patient. It's because we're not recognizing that in order to have that big manifestation, you need to learn a new level of balance. And maybe that even begins with you need to be balanced at the level that you are now. Because if the universe were to give you this huge projection, like boom, like imagine like you went from zero and having nothing to all of a sudden, like, you have this house and all these responsibilities, and you have this family, and you have this business that requires your attention, your skills, and your ability to do this. If you went from zero to that overnight, you'd crash. You would crash. You would be the tree that got ripped out of the ground and toppled over, and then you'd have to restart everything. And then you'd probably be wondering, like, something opposes me. There is an enemy outside of myself, right? Which is false. The universe is making sure that you stay balanced by its very nature. This is not some entity or being that's like, I don't think they're ready yet. Right? There's nothing judging you. Like, there's nothing trying to keep you held down. This is just the way that energy works, the way that creation works. And oftentimes people are too impatient to actually just go through the process of growth. If you're in a phase of digging down your roots, dig your roots, but don't expect to see leaves. Don't expect to see fruit yet, because you need to recognize what phase you're in, and that you need to go through that phase in order to be balanced. Once you've dug your roots, once you've attained, let's say, a certain skill and something that you want to do, now you got to grow with it. Now you got to gain more experience with it. Now you got to go work with it like this and work with it like this, gaining new experience, gaining new knowledge, and making it so that becomes a natural part of you and what you're doing. Because this is what it's about, my friends, okay? You need to trust the process. You need to trust how when you call in something, it exists immediately. When you focus on something on an astral level and being like, I am this, I have this, and this, yada, 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 whatever it might be, it exists on that astral non-physical plane immediately. It is there with you. You better believe that, because this is the density or the non-density that allows us to move between ideas and move between energies. But in order for that to take root in this physical dense reality, which is a much slower, longer, deeper, denser, heavier vibration, it takes time. It takes time. This is why things come into this reality in seed form, like the tree. You don't look at the ground and put this tree in the ground and just plop like it's a tree right away. What happens? Like seriously, try to think of one thing that happens like that, where it's like, boom, I have this massive projection and boom, it's right there. There it is. This is the same thing with even how humans are born, right? I mean, it's like the mother is not going to give birth to a fully grown human that is in their potential, right? It would destroy the mother. It would destroy the very thing that is bringing life into the experience, just like we have the divine mother, right? Just like Earth has the divine mother, okay? This is a birthing process. You have to respect that process, because it starts at a point of conception, which is when you call in the energy. And you better believe, like I said, the moment you call in the energy, it exists. It exists and it's there. Then you go through the first phase of that, which, can you hold on to the energy? Can you stay in that energy, in that projection long enough for it to take root within your life? This is kind of how they talk about building habits too, right? It takes what they say, like 30 days to build a habit, 60 days for it to become normal to you, and 90 days for it to become part of your lifestyle. So think of these cycles. Some things, they take much longer than that. Sometimes it'll take you a year to figure something out, maybe several years to figure something out. But then once you do, if you do it right, you've planted the seed and those roots are firm. Then from that strong foundation, you're going to start growing up. You're going to start growing out, but you have to continue to water it. You have to continue to nurture that projection, because you can't just assume that, okay, I did everything that I need to do, now I'm just going to wait. There's a certain stage where your projection actually sort of takes on a life of its own, where it becomes a sort of egregor in itself, where it's like, now this thing that you do, and maybe this business idea or something like that, well, now I have all these people that are helping me with it, and I have this and that, and it just runs itself because you did all the groundwork. Now it works, and you just need to come and plug into it and work with it. Then it becomes a process of co-creation rather than creation. Build it and they will come, right? But when it comes to these initial stages, this is why people end up feeling like they can't manifest, or like they can't do anything, or they can't create anything. It's because they're not honoring the cycles. They're not honoring the seasons. We have to remember that it takes time for these things to grow. It takes time to build these things, especially if you have a really big projection. But keep believing, keep focusing, because that's what you're doing to nourish it right now. Keep focusing on you being balanced. Keep taking care of yourself and taking care of what you have now, right? If you can't take care of your one bedroom apartment, how in the world do you think you're going to take care of that 50 acres of land that you want, or this giant house that you want, or whatever it is? You got to remember that it starts small, and we have to do it right when it's small. Because if we can't do it right when it's small, we can't do it right when it's big. If we can't do it right by ourselves, if we can't do right by ourselves, how could we do right by something else? Right? It all starts within. This is all a process of becoming rather than a process of attaining. This is all about you. It's all about how you're maintaining balance, and how once you can maintain balance from the inside, how can you maintain balance for this thing that you're going to create? Because it's possible, my friends. You could actually create anything that you want by bringing in that seed form, but you have to be willing to do the work that that seed requires. You know, there are some trees that it's like they'll grow anywhere and you don't really have to do much with them. There's others that they don't get water on a certain day when it's hot, they're done. Right? So think about that. Think about what you're trying to manifest and how much it's going to take, how much work it's going to take, how much proactive intention it's going to take for you to actually bring that in. Maybe it's high maintenance, maybe it's not, but eventually things grow to a stage where they're more stable because you put in the work of creating that foundation. Okay, my friends. So that's all for today. With that, take care of yourself before you try to take care of something else. Be right with yourself before you try to make something else right. And it will be so much easier because you already learned how to balance. You already learned how to take care of what needs to be taken care of. And now anything you create outside of you is just going to be a reflection of that. All right, my friends. So with that, be well, be whole, and take care. We'll talk soon.